many times Ohio has moved to enact legislation anticipating some sort of federal action. For some reason, Ohio's wanted to be there first. You know, almost like, almost in a sense, the first to hold the gun to their head and pull the trigger. And there's no reason for that. I think Ohio should only act in situations like this when it's forced to act. And even then, grudgingly, and perhaps fighting every step of the way. That even exposes bigger problems, I believe, with, for instance, the accepting of federal matching monies. We see this happening over and over again on our highways, for instance. The federal government will come in and promise us a certain amount of money if we're willing to build Ohio, or build a highway according to their regulations, their rules, etc. So we take their money. And then we find out that the highway has to be built according to their specs, their locations, EPA standards. If there's a bee colony somewhere along the trail that the highway is planned, a bridge has to be built, so on and so forth. Medicare and Medicaid. We accept federal dollars for new programs, saying to ourselves the federal government's paying for 60% of it. This is a good thing. We're getting free money from the feds. Well, the reality is that it's our money. It's still our tax dollars. These are programs that we may not need, but we take them because we feel almost as if it's free money. Over the years, though, we still have to pay those dollars for those programs. And plus, in many cases, these programs are not things that people really need. They're extras that are tacked on to Medicaid, for instance. But people become, if you will, addicted to the programs. So Ohio is still carrying 40% of the bill for these new programs that many other states don't have. But we've brought into the state nonetheless because we're getting all this federal money. And so here we are straddled with a Medicaid program in Ohio that we can't afford, that's unsustainable, that has all these extra benefits tacked onto it that aren't required under Medicaid, but Ohio has voluntarily signed onto it, carrying all this extra money. Therefore, it's difficult to reduce taxes. Therefore, it's difficult to grow the economy because the public sector is eating up so much wealth that there isn't a whole lot of money left to invest in the private sector. So I think that's kind of a long-winded answer to a short question. But yeah, Ohio has acted too quickly, too often, to enact programs that really aren't necessary and in fact long-term are harmful to the state.
On the website, Project Vote Smart, the following statement is attributed to you. In order for Ohio to allow more job creation, the state must enact common sense legislation designed to make government smaller, less expensive, less intrusive, and a true servant of the people. Is this accurate? And more importantly, if it is, what specific initiatives do you have in mind that might help accomplish this goal?
Well, there's some things I've done that I think support that goal. One thing I'm really proud of, I passed legislation that indexes Ohio's income taxes to inflation, income tax brackets. And Ronald Reagan did the same thing in 1986. We finally accomplished that in 2010 here in Ohio, so we were only, what is that, 24 years or something behind the times. But what it does, this year it saves taxpayers over 100 million, and by 2015 it'll be saving taxpayers in Ohio almost $500 million. And what it does is it leaves more wealth in the hands of citizens and puts less in the hands of government. And that's the real key in my mind to freedom. In many ways, wealth is power. And in some ways, power is related to freedom. If you take people's wealth away, if you take their property away, if you take their jobs away, it's difficult for them to defend themselves. But when people have resources, it's difficult to just cast them aside and take their freedoms away from them. So I think the more that we can sort of starve the beast, if you will, and that's remove more resources from government, the more power, the more freedom that we leave in the hands of people. So you understand how the income tax bracket thing works that I mentioned earlier. The way it was before, the income tax brackets were static. So you'd get a cost of living increase, it might be a 3% increase, and it would move you into a higher tax bracket. So you get a pay increase, and then the government would take it away from you because it moved you into a higher tax bracket. But when the tax brackets increase with inflation, you get a cost of living increase, and the tax bracket goes up at the same rate as your pay goes up, so it doesn't move you into a higher tax bracket. It's amazing how much money the government was absconding from the people through just keeping those tax brackets static over the years. I could expand on that a little bit, but you have other questions, so I'll be quiet.
We do. Okay. The same website states that you are an advocate for a balanced, human-centered approach to environmental concerns. The same piece states that you recognize the critical importance of clean air and potable water. It is recognized, except by the most ardent left-wing environmentalists, that the federal EPA has gone overboard in its recent regulations. How do you characterize the actions of the EPA over the last 3 years, and how would you establish a balanced, human-centered approach?
Let's see.
Next question.
That's such a, so you're talking, how would I do that? How would I do that? Let's see. That's quite a question.
Abolish the EPA.
What was that?
Abolish the EPA.
Well, yeah.
They've completed their mission. Their work is done. It's time to salute the flag, lower the flag, and say, good job to all of you. Dismiss the employees, send them home. The job is finished.
Yeah, I'm sure that's his answer.
Yeah, are those your words, a balanced, human-centered approach? They were attributed to you.
Yes, they are my words. Yes, those are my words.
And perhaps you could just expound on what you
Sure,
mean by
yeah. I would say that what I meant by that was simply that the important thing about the environment is how it actually is impacting people on a daily basis. Not whether the snail darters are all in, fine health or not. Not whether there are some frogs with 2 heads. The important thing is, how are people being impacted by the environment? How are our lives being affected on a daily basis? Is there clear evidence, for instance, go back to the E-check, that the E-check is really necessary, that it's really improving our environment? We had reams of evidence that showed that the air quality had been getting better and better in Ohio, throughout the country, in fact, over the last 40 years. The EPA just looked the other way and pretended as if that evidence didn't exist and went on promoting and expanding their regulations. So the key factor has to be, the most important thing about the environment is how it's affecting human beings. Not in some theoretical world where the EPA lives, but in the real world where we live. Are people being negatively impacted on a broad scale by the environment? Do we need these drastic measures to change the environment? I don't believe that we do. I think the EPA has gone too far, too often.
Let me shock everyone here by saying that I had a silver medal from the EPA. I got it many, many years ago. During